Teleportation grounds, core lines of settings and travel, 13 lines and transistors. Setting lines, sequence lines are 72 measure. Scales, communication lines, and overheads, 13 lines, modification lines, and stargates of 12 signals. So, how this is all set up now is that there's 3 spectrums of set lines. You got inner spectrum, outer space. Center core, outer core. Set communication setting. Central system, central calculation, central division. 3 signals and set lines of ground lines, communication lines of service. So 3 lines of attractions of past, set position present, and its future attractions. Okay? Which means the team is here in sequence, right here in outline setting. Okay? Humanity, team, units, and operatives. All right, coming in attraction centers. Now the units are coming in sequence lines of 24 measure, 24 grounds, 24 systems, 24 surface. Okay? Setting lines of core centers, lines of center operation system, and 3 tractions, and 3 divisions of 3 platforms. All right, the center core line calculation setting, the position location system, past, present, and future comes together in one system, one pyramid, one traction. Directing lines, modification lines of 3 symbolism all together in position of force calculation system in a transformation system of transformer setting. Wow. That's how it's set up in sequence. Okay. Measures and scales as a 72 line is position of 144 tractions. Now we're coming to high core centers. The team now is in sequence. And locations, units, operators, it says locations, units, divergence, regions, lines. Okay, transformation, transformers, all spark. Setting core lines of settings, indirect signals. Setting 4 line sequence, and position lines of 3 measure, 3 communications, and 4 tractions. Okay. We understand the central calculation lines of hieroglyphics now in cubical screens. Waving panels and 3 track centers lines of communication. 4 windows of track location and setting. Division lines of 1, division lines of 2, division lines of 3, division lines of 4. Okay, there's the pyramid and track communication setting, overline sequence, and panel communications. Box frame transformation centers are 1 cycle, 3 centers, 3 track communications. 4 lines of core centers override in sequence and 1/3 over ground. Setting window frames, setting line communication setting and travel. Open window frames into all spark line screens in overline sequence and set position location and travel. Now the window frame changes the core lines of attractions, setting lines of divots over screen, 3 lines of calculation setting and travel. Setting high cores lines of communication setting and windows. So all it is a high lines of teleportation units, information lines of grounds, a symbolism of core centers into box frames, and triangulation screen lines adaptations and processing, 4 angles, 3 set core centers and travel, directing correlation system to your crowns and track location. Your crown. Their crown now is outline. 3 lines of cycles, 3 lines of centers, 3 line provision. They're living outside now in cycles and track locations. The units will be in the line screens, 24 lines of measure, 20 from position of 144. We're all going to be in 144, every single one of us. The only difference is the set core centers and track location lines of team operatives will be 7 days ahead of schedule, and position of the units will be 4 days ahead of schedule in body frame. 7 years ahead, 4 years ahead in travel. Set calculation lines of grounds, core centers into holographic gridding and communication to its game system. Set communication high centers and travel communications. Open through panels, open through track locations. Okay. Now it gets very confusing if you don't understand the core lines of communication settings. See, the pyramid gets a lot more complicated, a lot more division lines, so it's a square root now. It's no lines into point lines of graph communication setting. There's no 12 measure, there's no 24 sequence, there's no 48 measure communications, and there's no 72 track communication computer framing. Now we're 144 outline core centers, lines of outer space and setting, setting communication system all through spectrum through transformation system. All right. Now, Understanding how to go through hard communication geometrics, geological and geographical systems, box frames, triangulation frames, box frames, triangulation core lines of frames, main frames, central frames, electrical line communications. Hard communication lines of grounds, more complicated system of travel. All through highways in set position. The team has to get used to living in set lines and outer lines of space now. All right, so all it is a window frame line, transformation lines of all sparks and location setting, all calculations. Setting lines of window frames and line core centers into your perimeters and parameters and secure line defense lines. Okay, so you have to really start protecting your systems now, team. Especially the ones that are in 24 line, 24 sequence, 24 center. Okay. It just gets a lot more easy to understand the positions of the platforms and the hangars. You know, you just go to higher frequencies of position location to a system all through travel communications. Okay. So you just see more lines of calculations and sending to your window frames. Directing signals, lines of grounds, and communication sending high lines of surface. Communication lines of 1 ground, 2 ground, 3 ground, 4 ground, holographic stripping, and direct signals. Sending core lines of attractions and direct signals and ground lines and communication lines of surface. Process lines that indicate lines of 1, flux over 3, 4 lines of signals, and 2 electrical line of fencing, direct signals and ground lines of surface and traction. So your drawings just get more complicated in set position location setting. Start living the outer spectrum, outer clocking, outer communication system all through travel. Okay, very powerful stuff. Back in sequence, back in panel, back in operation setting into all spark communication. All right. Now, once we understand how to track its communication setting to notification lines and grounds, we got them into higher core lines of flux. Setting signals in line position of Y screens. Directing lines of 3 panels into 4 sequence. All right. Direct lines of 1 grounds, process lines of 3 centers, 4 sig locations. Pyramid 1, Pyramid 2, Pyramid 3, Pyramid 4, and Pyramid 5 in center operation. Now, setting core lines of high centers sets platforms of E factors over a line into center communication. Directing lines into high core centers. Starting with all communication setting in travels. Cross-line calculation system all through measure and scale. Your communication, your schematics, and your primer circuits get lines of communications higher in travel. Ooh-ah. More complicated in set position or transformation system in the 30 unit in travel. Sets core lines in screen adaptation to a system all through communications. Right? This is the application or transformation unit in travel. Ooh yeah. All right, so it just gets more complicated. But it's a lot more fun when you understand how to use it line core centers to energetic line grids or energetic cores or structural line division settings and set lines. Or in that communication setting coming into this position location to its platform. Okay? So start living the outline, the out core, and the out track location lines of 3 cycles, 1, 2, and 3 set locations. Okay? 3 division lines of 1 lines, sparks its communication. And 3 lines of angles. Outline setting. You guys are no longer here in set position. Okay, this is out now. Okay, so that puts lines of 12. Okay, the inner line core centers is 2030. That's the inner line communications is setting, right? You're living in set lines of center communication system, overlaps the system. Center core lines of 2000, position location of 3, 4, and tractions, right? Directing set locations into your transformation system, your transformers. Okay? Now, the sending communications high direct signals puts all communications sending in travels. Sending core lines of communication. This is the Earth that no longer exists in their system of travel. Okay, no, they're no longer here. They're in set position here in center. So live in the outline overrides the sequence of pi and set position locations. That puts lines of settings into 2030, 2034, and position lines, setting lines of transformation system into 144 sequence, set lines of 3000 line setting, over cross location override settings at 2080, and track locations. Okay? So getting in that line screen adaptation is processing, puts all communication lines as centers. Communicate the lines of grounds and center communication setting. Puts 3000 lines of measure and scale communication lines of center operation center line surface. Setting communication line high direct locations at 2080 that puts them in track communication setting in a 12 clocking system of travel. So that's what's going to happen in Friday in sequence, all through set position. Okay, it's complicated, isn't it? But I just want you to truly understand, and the units are going to be line position location setting interactions. This position location system, you understand how to go through spectrum lines and core lines, and 3 lines of core centers in a 4 communication system. Set lines of cores and star gates and setting. Okay, setting lines of 24 star gates, set core centers. Now you got to be in a 24 signal and track locations, right? Your platform changes communication lines to outline setting of your clocking systems now. And 4 communication setting is 7 over traction. It's going to get more complicated for the team now because they're transformers. Direct lines of 1, 2, 6, 8, and 12, and 24 set position of signal. All right, setting lines of grounds and core centers, communication setting highlights the surface. Okay, so your transformers are here at the top and signify ground lines of communication. Setting lines of ground lines of surface interactions. So they can high force lines and position a higher line of communication dimensions and portals and stargates and universities and track locations. Live in the outline setting and clocking lines outside correlations of travel. So your clocking system is now in this central communications 144, set lines of 0, 0, 0, and 0. Okay. Process calculation lines of high signals, puts lines of 12 signals, setting lines of 0, 0, and 0, 1 in set locations. Travel point lines of 4 lines of signals, and travel lines of point lines of 1 line, 4 line rotations in triangulation system of travel. Travel point lines of graphs indicates 1 dot, setting lines of 1 indication lines and track location lines of 3 arrows in travel. Setting direct signals and ground lines of surface and platforms at E factors over screen adaptation system. Process calculation lines outline signals of clocking communication. Right? So your clocking is going to get a little more difficult now because you're living outside of clocking, no longer inside a spectrum. Complicated setting and process communication lines of arrows and indication system all through files of communication. All right. So once you get in that platform communication setting, you set up your highways and tractions. Okay, platform here. So you set your crop circles in the atmospheres of space now. Your crop circles are no longer on the grounds; they're in space, floating in track location. Now, getting in that core centers, we got to go through line core lines and high position location to a system. Setting communication lines of grounds, set lines of 1, 2, and 3 in measure, 4 lines of signals, ground lines of platforms, and set lines in outer space and communications. Platform setting core line settings of crop circles, line communication setting, a code configured system, code weaving. Back in sequence, back in panel, back in operation surface, and track communications. All right, so the digital frames, and you can see it traveling already, see? It's traveling already. Platform 1, platform 2. Okay. Platform 3 in center travel. Core lines of traction centers over cross location lines in 3 centers and 3 rotation surface and traction. Direct lines and direct signals and ground lines of surface into holographic gridding. Walking surface line communication setting and travel. Okay. Signifies core lines of calculation setting on lines of 3 centers into flux over line in your pyramid that's now in a square root of panel. Window frames, core lines of track centers and high communication setting and travel. 4 lines of signals and 3 levels of track location to a system. Direct lines and calculation screen adaptation. Okay. Your drawing is just getting more complicated in set position lines of travel. Okay. Well, basically not understanding what's going on with the settings of travel. So it has a high core centers line communication setting, but position location of system, all lines of track location your flux. All right, so flux of anomaly, lines, core centers, and lines of spectrum over screen adaptation of system all through clock communications. Clocking lines of 0, clocking lines of 2, and clocking lines of 3 in setting. Okay, so the team on 24 line sequence of 24,000 lines of setting has to understand how to communicate in the living cycles of the outer spectrum of outer space now. So you're a ground line surface in outer space position, walking line sequence, flying direction times in levitation grounds. higher levels of XT1000s and platforms, higher lines of transformation units, Androids, sideboards, thin bots, or anything in travel communications. Okay? But you have to understand they still have the dock. Okay, so you can expand your settings in expansion screens, outlines, core centers, and 3 lines of measure and scale. Okay? But your no provision lines of cycles and earth line of core and track location. You're not here anymore. You're on here now. Live in the cycles of outer space, a clocking line is the direct lines into position keys to install Spark. And all Spark is all levels on communication setting. Outlines cores, direct lines in earth lines of setting, travels endpoint communications. 3 lines of signals and 4 communication. Set core lines of set calculates the lines outer clocking system of travel. See, it gets complicated, right? Spectrum lines into Stargate measure, which is Stargate 24 and next Friday in sequence. Stargate communications. Directing core lines, outline signals now as a Stargate communication lines of setting. Setting core lines into spectrum core centers, line direct signals and travel communications system. Higher lines of travel. Direct lines inner cycles is now a Stargate communication setting. Outlines of core centers are clocking communication lines of surface and travel. So it just lines its inner line. Setting core lines into an octagon, into a hexagon screen. 3 lines of signals, 4 lines of panels. Travels in rotation surface and travel in 4 lines of signals, 5 lines of measures, and 6 calculation screen adaptation net setting. Gets more complicated, it gets a lot more aligned through the transformation system. Now with these scales, the communication lines of 3 clocking systems and 3 lines of grounds. Okay? Setting core lines of track centers in divots over transition. The transistors over resistors sets lines of 3 lines in 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 12 in track communications. Setting core lines of setting and center communication. Okay. Now we set up the solar panels. Part acceleration goes in spin cycles. Core lines is track centers and set positional keys to a system through the track location. Then we upline core lines of communication lines to its Ramo graph. Core lines of track lines into a center graph communication setting. Process communication setting. Flip the switch and travel communication. Okay. Setting ground lines, core centers, lines of outer spectrum, outer clock communications. The units are going to be in that signals, lines of Friday, indirect signals into 24. The core lines of track centers will put them in 32,000 lines at MI core centers, out of sequence lines at MK Ultra. Directing signal lines at grounds, MK Ultra correlates the system to all of the operatives in position locations into 48,000 setting. All right, so getting lines of 24,000, 3 lines of signals. Okay, so MK Ultra. All right, so in their minds, into kaleidoscopes, eagle lines, core centers above, and track case lines and 0 correlations, 0 clocking system of center communication. All right, setting core lines into Ultra is the unification setting to the levels of their transformation system, which is their transformers, coming into the atmospheres that ground lines of symbolism. Process lines outer spectrum, outer realm, out of norm. Outer line communication setting, outer orbits. 3 signals lines of Stargate and measure, setting lines to hexagon. Sets core centers lines into diffusings and deciphers. 3 lines of signals and 3 track location. Okay. Setting communication lines of grounds and track location of system, high lines of travel communications. So we modify the grounds, we modify the system, the lines of spectrum, the sets recourse lines of channels, and 3 lines of communication lines of mapping, outline core centers, and pi generation. Very complicated stuff, a lot of fun. But see how it gets more complicated when you get lines of travel in communication to a setting? It gets more complicated, guys, it really does. But understanding how to go through 24 line sequence puts all communication in outer space. All right? Live in the outer space is a high line spectrum of light. You come into high core centers. Your direct lines of line core centers has a box frame and set track locations, right? So your frame communication lines, your 12 clocking system is outlined now. It's spreading its lines anomalies through travel. It's spreading, right? So what that does, it deletes and defaults the system location and setting, taking you out of 2025, 26, 27, 28, 29, 2000 lines of 30 measure, and communication lines of center. Process calculus lines into quantum lines of confusion. Core lines into fusion over screen, directing lines of two lines of signals in process communication. All right, so in that line communication setting, it puts all lines of center communication lines that indicate lines of 0 and track locations of 1 center into quantum communication setting into LOs, QR codes, travel endpoint lines of graph, and 3 lines of flux and 4 lines of measure and travel communications. Now, overcross lines to an X8000 platform change communication lines directions to an override sequence, override signal over ground surface. Setting core lines of tractions at data ports, setting lines of information lines of grounds into symbolist lines of track centers, into classification line high centers, into lots of pathogens. Directing lines of core centers, X8000 comes in, docking 1, set position lines of docking 2, set position lines of docking 3, and line communication outer space and travel. 4 docking system of outer space through clocking. Clocking line screens, directing lines of 1, 0, 1 center, and 1 surface and track communications emerging in scale. Setting core lines of channels, ground lines of surface, and set position lines of travel. Grounds core lines into solar sail, dimension line core centers, into metric core centers, into correlation system, into metal interface. Set lines of 4 tractions, cross line signals, and graph communications. So your solar sails are now a metal, right? Sending core lines into out of silicone, anti-Karen, and into metal, directing lines into metal interface location of mercury that tracks its communication system through an outline setting and 3 triangulation split lines of communication. Ooh-ah. Setting core lines of tractions and high centers in travel communication. Okay? Very powerful stuff. All right. So you just have to understand how to use the outline settings of clocking lines. Setting lines of provision location of platforms and track locations. All right, so you got 3 central lines of set lines of nebula. All right, 3 lines of cycles. So setting lines of communication lines of train at least a line. The 12 signal is this in settings now, okay, for the team in the 24 sequence. It comes just expanding line screen adaptations of process communications and your signature lines of grounds. Puts all communication lines of surface and track to its communications high centers and travel. Okay, so you got to understand how this all works now. So the more you expand out, the more you expand in center operation of system and travel communications. That's what you got to come into, team. 3 generation lines of pi, 3 generation lines of sky, and lines of grids that puts all communication of panels in Skynet divisions in rotation surface and tractions. Your solar system. Process lines of 12 signals, process lines of 1 position, process lines of 2 position, process lines of 3 position, process lines of 4, and process lines of 6. There's your planets. Oh yeah. Around the system is a center core line communication setting a surface. It rotates its system lines of track. See that pause? Interesting, right? Okay. Directing ground lines, core lines of calculation setting into solar system to solar system interactions. Opens all signals and correlation system and travel. The set position lines of 12 line signals puts the lines of 24,000 lines into MK Ultra screen. Directing signals into ground lines of service over line signals adaptation of clocking system and track locations back to 0. 3 signals, lines of grounds. So high core lines of calculation setting. 12 lines of measure, 12 lines of scale, 12 lines of balance, 12 lines of destinations. Setting lines of 4 tractions, 3 provisions, 3 cycles, and 4 grounds of set lines communication system of surface and traction. Ooh-ah. Okay? Bring it back in sequence, back in panel, back in operation, screen adaptation. Okay? Flux over line is now signaling into higher communication lines and settings. So the units, high core lines of communication setting, puts lines of 2027. I'm just telling you guys where you're in trash. Sets core lines of high position 2025. Set locations, delete, 4 lines of signals. Back in 0 track location lines, put you in all transitions over screen. High core centers on line position locations is 2027 now as a 12 clocking system. Sending core lines into 2030. All right, so setting lines of communication system. Live in the cycles of outer line spaces, totally different lines of interspex locations. Get in the team and signal lines into outline core centers and empath and track locations. Setting lines of core centers in travels puts all communication system all through setting the 2030 interactions with the units. 3 signals, 3 grounds, 3 formation lines, and 4 communications and setting and travel. Signal lines of 1 in the line rotation surface and travel. Calculation lines of 12 signals, line position of 24 measure. Scales communication system puts lines of 32,000 line rotations and routers and screen adaptation of surface and track communications. Ooh-ah. So I'm just telling you guys where you're going to be on Friday. It's all lines of communication lines of a capsule now. So setting lines of course centers puts all communication lines of provision of dimension lines of scales. Now scale communication system puts everything in track communication to its setting. Now let's get in line signals of 30 line measure and position lines into 10 cycles. We got 10 cycles lines, setting lines of 0, 1 lines of signals. Remember team, you're position your hieroglyphics and your transformation units and travel by point lines of graph. You have to start understanding how to use your outlines of clocking and no line communication interspectrum of clocking. So your outlines of 3 sets lines of 2 and track location. Okay, clocking lines this way in travel. Okay, no longer this way in travel in set position. Okay, so you're from here and here now. So you got to come back and signal and balance out the communication system all through travel. Okay, that's what the team has to come into. Living the cycles of outline correlates the communication setting of transformation system and track location and setting. The process of communication lines puts lines of 3 levels in setting rotation. Setting communication lines exceed 1,000 goes in lines of high course centers into the center position location lines of travel. Calculation modified down the strip line and communication lines of tubing and line position location of power over generation system. Power over line, spinner, line rotation setting, and 4 spectrums and solar direct signals and modification ground lines and calculation in line position. Okay. Over cross lines of platforms, outline setting. Process lines of 1, marking lines of 2, marking lines of 3,000 measure. Okay. Center core lines of track centers of center communication. Like I said, your schematics are going to get a lot more complicated and a lot more fun. All right, so we have to understand how to outline the settings into flux line. We got a flux line here now, and we got a flux line here now. Okay, so this is 12 in signal now for the team and 24. Outline signal locations of 4 platforms, right? Really interesting track lines. So you have the 24 platform lines, which is your 24,000 measure now, 3 signals. And track location lines of 3 cycles and position of 4 measure. Okay, that's where the team is now in transformer. All right, so clocking system of 0 line correlates to setting at 12 line signals and travel endpoint lines communication. Setting course centers into compass. Directed signals lines of ground lines of 3 and ground lines of 4 and line rotation surface and travel. Higher track lines in line rotation system puts all communication high settings. 144 platform. Setting course centers line position at 3,044 platform. And set position. Okay. Setting track lines going this way and set track locations going this way and opposite signals and 3 lines of ground location of clocking. Clocking screen lines of 144 adds the signal and ground lines of surface that center cores its system and outer spectrum of clocking communication. Your power accelerator. All right, so directing lines of panels. Now we have a 12 line rotation and 24 platform and in line position of 24 measure of scale of space and time. Sets core lines of track centers. Setting tether lines, you be connected along core centers into earth lines in spectrum of 6 over line and 6 over 12. Sets position lines of travel, have a direct line link in process communication. Overline signals, flux over screen adaptation lines of force. 3 signature patterns. 3 core lines of tractions and direct signals into modification grounds, sets lines of part acceleration system going back and forward and backward in the same time measure as scale. Set communications back in sequence, back in panel, line rotations, outer space and traction. Oh yeah, look at that, how powerful that is. All right, space lines anomaly. Setting core lines. We got 3 lines of measure, 3 line rotation cycles, and 3 track communication lines, 11 systems. So we got 3 lines of signals, 3, 3, 3. We got 3 lines of course centers of 4 tractions of 4 zeros, directing lines of 3 lines of flux, and 3 communications. All right? Remember, this is all transformation, all transformers and track communications. Okay, So we got 2 lines of 3 signals into high course centers and 3 lines of satellites. On standby, directing lines of course centers and 3 tractions, crossing lines of high centers and laser track communications. Remember, this is outlines of communication and clocking. Clocking 1, clocking 2, and clocking setting and rotation. All right, directing lines of panels, kaleidoscope, course centers, and line position location of power. Gender discrete lines, upswing core lines of communication lines of high setting. Process line to signals and location. Electrical grid, fencing lines of 4, overcross location lines of 1, 2, 3, structures over 1, 2, and 6, and line set location is all spark and traction. Setting core lines of settings, process lines of 1 signal, process lines of 4, and line rotation system in your pyramids, and rotation setting and track locations of outer space and travel. Booyah. Center core lines of 1, center core lines of 2, center core lines of 3, and spectrum over lights in particle acceleration system, time measure, time scale, outline, setting, and clocking line communication lines of surface. Look how powerful that is. Spinning through set position location spectrum. Outlines, outer space, outer time, outer space, outer time. Spinning through cycles. In spectrum of lights, in spectrum of divisions, in transmission system. All right, track centers. We go through open signal, open panel, open traction. Directing lights, line rotation surface, and all sparking. Core lines of setting in hieroglyphics. Cross lines of signals and ground lines of set position. Complicated, isn't it? But a lot of fun. All right, signal lines, core lines, calculated lines, and ramification system of travel. Direct lines, calculated lines of cells, puts lines of 34 tractions into 11 measure. Set lines of 2 panels and triangulation line position split lines of anomaly. 3 signal lines of grounds. We got inhibitors over screen and flux over screen. Setting lines of course centers into data ports and 1 file track locations. Symbolism lines of 4 settings and position location of 3 set position. Process lines of indication 1 flux over screen to direct signals as center communication setting at surface. Process lines of platforms and both direction signals in cross locations. Process lines of 1, process lines of 2, process lines of 0 and ground communications. Setting circuits, line rotation system at surface. Going around and around in signal. Platforms out, platforms in, platforms out, platforms in, and travel in 1 cycle. Cross line signal, process lines in, process lines out, process lines out, process lines in, and set position lines of travel. Directing lines of platforms, process lines of 3 over tractions, 4 line divisions, cross lines, hanger point lines of setting in process communication high setting. Setting communication lines of grounds, symbolism, line course centers into teleportation unit and platform over E. Setting lines of communication, setting high lines of surface and travel positions of routes and routers. Outer space lines of anomaly, line course centers, lines of travel, direct signals and modification grounds, and core lines of travels in Tango Tango Foxtrot communication. Sets communication lines of ground set position. All right, so sending signals back in sequence, back in panel, operation cycle. Capsules, direct lines and flight lines, navigation course centers, location of escape. Direct lines of S lines, course centers, systematic line E, and lines of position of factors. We go through intro. Now that analyzes high centers and line condition setting. Default lines into brackets. Directing signal lines, E factors over 1, factors over 3. Set core lines, initiate run, set signals. Signature patterns, voice line grid into 007. Okay. Process lines of indication setting and process lines of L over C over T. Setting track lines of R, lines of communication lines of I. Directing signal lines of M line course centers, lines of C. Setting ground lines, course centers, lines of N over C. Setting track communications, routes to the routers, and set lines of course centers of center communication setting over cross location system, all through spectrum through outer space. Outer space of 1, outer space of 2, outer space of 1, set position lines of travel, and track location system, all through provision. All done through equation. See, everything goes around in the system of balance. Okay, so the team needs to balance out command 1. They need to balance out not just their 24 line settings, but 24,000 line seconds equals lines of 2,400,000 in track locations. 2 million point lines of graph, 400,000 lines. That's divot over 1 cell. Process lines and divots over screen into set lines of track locations. Setting Mach lines, core lines into 0 seconds. Sets track location lines of 2 billion line screens. That's 2 billion lines of factors, Core lines communication transformation setting and process communication lines of 0. Process lines of 1, set lines of 3. Core lines of center of 4, set position of C over traction. All right, now in that position location with system, guys, you have to understand how to use the outline core centers of clocking. Clocking lines of 1 over lines of 2 over 3. Okay, setting core lines of track centers is a pi line. Pi screen over line signals sets lines core centers into a Stargate measure that scales its position lines as bounds inside core system of inner spectrum of light. You got a track location set and set track locations. All right, so direct lines of panels, process lines of 3 centers. Road graph, 3 lines of indication system and travel. Okay, sending core centers, lines of position lines of 4 lines of communication lines of travel. Core lines of signals, 2 billion lines, vectors over setting into all process communication lines into galactic line rotation and surface interaction. Ooh-ah, spinning through cycles and high generation. All right. See how it goes in line position, the balance? All right. So we center off, we change the communication lines at grounds and set position location of travel. Goes in the opposite directions and set position location of the system. Goes through 6 and goes through 9, all in sequence. You see it, 6 and 9. It doesn't matter where it goes in travel, but your direct line signals outline setting and clocking. Setting direct signals to an alpha line rotation sets calculation lines of theta in a box frame in a triangulation frame and center communications. Okay, sending core centers, 12 line signals, flux over 3. Energize, directed signals, lights over signal, ground lines of surface. Process lines, navigation of pre-flights, direct signals into intelligence or formation lines of grounds. Sets core centers, energize positional platform, light signals, common interactions. Right? All right. So we got a yellow signal that sets lines of travel, endpoint communications, traffic inventory. Traffic inventory sets lines of 3 grounds, 3 symbolisms, and 3 centers of operation. Center communication, high centers of travel, and communication lines of surface, position location of the system. Round and round she goes. All right. Now we cross the lines of green. Now green indicates the lines in laser line rotation surface in a 4-line measure and scale. Process communicates high centers of 3 platforms, setting pyramid into 4-line signals and 4 set lines of flux and track communication setting the travel. In line, in rotation surface interaction. Remember, everything's an outline setting now. Nothing's inside, because that's where the team is. All units will pick this up and travel in their coordinates when they come to high line communication through MI sequence. Now we go into blue. Blue lines, overlines, cross lines, overline screen locations set at plasma lines, high center location of the system. Process lines of its mountain and 3 track lines of alpha, delta, and theta communications. Setting track lines of high center interference, high position of its program. Sending lines of course centers, direct signals, and ground lines of surface, and earth lines of indication lines in 1 center. 1 surface, 1 traction, 1 division. Location centers puts lines of red. Now red indicates lines of security on 3 panels. Sending course centers, laser line course centers, line direct signals, and ground lines of service. Setting communication setting electrical line grids location its motherboard. Directing signal lines and half lines and measures, scales of communication system all through traction. Ooh-ah. Sets communication lines of grounds to set position. All right, so we center off. We center off communication lines, ground lines of settings, clocking lines of 0, clocking lines of 1, clocking lines of 3, clocking lines of 12, and travel communications. 3 inline course centers, line position, 3 spectrum lights, center lines, 2 lines of signals, outlines of 3, and rotation service, over lines, over pi, and line rotation surface, and track communication system, all through center operation. Hoo-ah. You guys weren't ready to see that because the frequency was too high. Now I got to do it again so you understand the central system of constantly getting forward, just existing all at once in travel. No, it's not there. See? I can't do it because you're not ready through frequency until you understand the outlines of space. So now I got to go through center line, change communication lines in 4 different angles, sending communication system, high lines of force. Then I can do the rotation spin line, core lines, outer line, space line communication system all through travel. Now you see it. All right. So we get a core lines of track centers in transformation setting. Processing communication lines and ground lines of box. Box line, frame line. Triangulation, box line, communication line, triangulation, and frame line. Direct lines of 3 windows and frame communication lines of travel. Hoo-ah. Platform core centers, line direct signals of grounds. Set communication system, you guessed it, your satellites in 3 track locations. Booyah, to connect with the transformers. Setting communicates line, outline, course centers, and measure and scale. It all communicates lines of surface. All right, that's setting lines and modification, ground communication, height, position, case to a system, all through programming. Oh yeah. Look, I took out the satellite because you're not ready. Woo! All right, so colorist lines and screens. We'll go through line, course centers, and webbing. Docking lines of one outline rotation. Set core lines and X lines of platform. X1 position, triangulation position. Transformation lines equals lines transform. Direct signals into mutate. Core lines blocking centers. Travel point lines of graph 007. Travel point lines general AI. Track case lines center operation setting 0 point system. 3 track case lines of pi. Generates lines of 1. Generates lines of 2. Process lines of center. Communication lines of service. Over cross location of screen. Booyah. Intelligence information. Okay, it's amazing what you understand tractions. All right, but it's also powerful when you come to your satellites through transformation setting and transformers. So your signified ground lines are now symbolism line connection settings to a clock line communication setting to travel. So your 24 sequence now, team, the set location of command 1 is now in 24 grounds, 24 measure, 24 panels, 24 atmospheres. Okay, so your process is now 144. Your clocking system is outside now. 1 travels, 4 signals, 4 panels of 3 settings. Okay, process lines of indication system and 12 lines of measure, a scale that puts all communication system and travel communications. Now, direct lines of panels has a 24 platform line position of solar sail and direct location system of your flywheel. Direct lines, course centers, earth line of 1, earth line of 2, earth line of 3 in set position. Setting core lines of travels, XC1001 and travel communications. All right, so direct signals in 24 platforms, center core lines, overline sequence lines of panels, and part of acceleration system through time through measure. Travels lines, all 3 signals, all set position location system, all through track location, all at once. All right. Setting lines of grounds, set lines, course centers, and line rotation setting laser. Skyline grids, transformers, 24 here, 36 lines of setting, and process of 24 here. Process lines of indication lines, 3 platforms over cross, setting cross lines of 4 lines of signal location of cross, direct lines of panels, and 3 lines of communication lines of flux, setting core lines into hieroglyphics, cross line communication screen lines. Setting core lines of tractions, and we steps of triangulation, Fibonacci, core lines of ground lines of surface, atmosphere lines, screen adaptation, signature lines of panels, signature lines of 1, data process lines of theta over 2. Set signals and ground lines of surface and tractions. All right, data ports, directing signal lines of ground lines of communication, height lines of service. Set M your satellites and provision lines of your modems and Wi-Fi's. Track to its communication setting, overline sequence. Process lines of 1, overline setting, overline sequence, and center communications. Okay, symbolism lines, track communication setting, overline sync locations. Time sequence, times calculation lines of center, triangulation, high position location to the system, all through kaleidoscope. Setting communication lines of grounds and track communication setting going together in set position location system, all through travel. Okay, clocking your systems from outside. Living outside now is in set position locations and setting and travel. Okay. Setting calculation ground lines is set position locations, high center location of travel. Setting clock lines your solar system is the center operation location lines, high calculation lines of travel. Setting course centers, 12 lines of divots, 12 lines of transitions over lines, resistors over pi. Setting core lines of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 line communication setting of travel, your solar systems. Center lines, course centers, sets communication lines of high position location in the system, all through travel. Okay, sets calculation lines, home lines, screen lines, adaptation of flux over screen. Travel lines, directed signals, and ground line surface. So the more you travel through light, look at the light, see the flux? 3 signals, lines, and grounds. Overline sequence, outline, calculate, center, clocking. Not inbound, outbound. All right. Not inline, outline. Not inner orbit, outer orbit. Your track divisions are here now in set position. So you got to recognize the inner line spectrum, okay? Not the outer line spectrum. Okay, so you're living the cycles of platforms and settings in 144. Setting course and transformers, directing signals and ground lines of surface and travel. Set core centers, line communications. Your body is a conceptual system of center now in track locations. Your center core system no longer exists. 2025, it's gone. 2026 is in signal, it's at 365. It sets position location lines and three-dimensional line settings. The density lines, information lines, and grounds. Center core system puts lines at 3 lines of measure, 6 lines of calculation setting, and 5-track communication. That's set system. Setting core lines sets communication lines of measure. Now that scales the communication system all through tractions. Direct lines, equal lines on 144 platform, and position lines of pod and track communications all through tractions. All right? So, again, I don't want anybody to get confused in that set lines of communication system all through spectrum calculations. Center core system, center line communication setting. Team is here now. Okay? So this is a line communication nebula, crossing line communications, over line signals. Okay? Setting core lines of calculation setting. Humanity is in the ground lines of surface. Process in 3 lines of core centers of core. Setting core lines and affirmance of 3 tractions, and center core centers and ground lines communication lines of surface. Operation signals, operation settings, and flux over screen adaptation lines of 1 signal. Setting core centers, energized sequence and line position of panel. Process lines of platforms over lines of E factors, EVAC, line conditions of velocity, vacuum. Direct lines and ground lines of set position location to your pyramid interaction. Okay, so you got a pyramid line up line and a pyramid line down line. So your 24 sequence is now in high scale. Outline spectrum, inline rotation. Outline spectrum, inline rotation. Okay, living signals in here, no longer here in center. Okay, so you're here in ground lines and surface. Your position location and country line is outline now, no longer inline. But you have to go outline to in because you're already inline to out. So when you get in that position location, your center operation comes together in line processing into positional locations of yin and yang through travel communication. All right? Then you go into symbolism lines of track centers going together all at once in set position. Clocking in, clocking out, clocking in, clocking out. Okay? Clocking out, clocking in. So once we understand how to go through the formation lines and grounds, and we understand location of prime lines and communication system, then we understand how to go through the platforms. Now, direct lines, high core centers, cubicle screens, box frame. That's 1 signature, 1 panel, 1 screen adaptations of flux. All right? Now, that overrides the sequence and line scale. Okay, process lines, direct signals, and 1 ground line communications. A top rotation vessel. See? Top rotation vessel, higher screen. So your teleportation vessel, your XT1000, just becomes more modified and higher communication lines and signals to travel. Has direct line and then it disappears. See? It's not there, it's gone. Amazing, isn't it? It's disappeared. Where'd it go? Right off the screen. All right, then it comes back at signal. The team's really starting to connect with the outer spectrum of space now through clocking system out through track location. And it travels through the time. All right, clocking lines, settings, 3 lines of signals, and travel communication of intelligence. Formation lines of grounds, 1 signal, 1 cross location, 1 center, 1 measure. Scales, communication lines, flight lines, core centers, and travel communications. Process calculus lines of indication setting. Overcross lines of 1, overcross lines of 2. Another teleportation vessel. All right, so direct signals, cross lines, 1, 2, 3 lines of measure. Cross calculation lines of over lines, sets position lines of E factors. Routes over line, travels endpoint communications of center communication setting. Data ports, infrastructure lines, earth line signals. Inhabitations, out habitations, and track cases of transformation system of travel. Ooh, look at that. Whoa, that's intense. Modified grounds, core lines and graphic communication lines of measure and scale communication. Travel point lines of graph, look at that. Look at that, all through light. It's amazing when you come together in travel communications. It's not just understanding the inner spectrum. It's not just understanding the outer spectrum. It's about understanding the know. It becomes an all memory in travel. But it's amazing when you come to higher communication set. See? It's moving by itself. See? It's giving you code. See? It's blinking. See? It's blinking by itself. All right. getting that position is a holographic line, and it's amazing too because it looks like a lamp, right? But it's amazing we get into higher communication lines, the laser track centers into process communications, high set communication and travel, all through track communications, setting, measure, and scale. Scaling balance lines and outer lines, cores, centers, line position case to its nebula. Nebula routes the routers, lines of 3 signals, 3 tractions, 3 divisions, and 4 set position. Okay? Rings over 1, rings over 2, and rings over 3 in set position. Okay? Close together in tractions, close together in tractions, right? Clocking centers of 0, flux over 3. Okay, guys? Set position location system, all through calculations of balance. Okay, pay attention. Okay, so you got 3 lines of grounds. Okay? Set position of center, and your flywheel and track communication lines of center position. Okay? Travel core lanes, core line communications. So the more you get in track centers of pi, you have a direct lines, it gets in higher communication lines of travel. It mutes the powers of generation screen line adaptation system, all through flux, all through generation system, all through track locations. Right? Look at that. All at once, all at once, all at once. So what the team is coming into is in and out and out and in one. That's direct and redirect. When you have a direct line sight, the CPU changes the core lines of time that change the measure of your algorithms. Your algorithm line rotation cycles change your patterns of behavior. Takes you out of line core centers to in-path, sets core lines in position location in your system, travel endpoint lines graph, home beacon light, travels lines, atmosphere lines, core centers, programmers, direct lines of mind adaptations, efflux, over existing, over screen, and lines communication system and travel. All through set position location system. Okay? Okay. Mechanism of force. Direct lines of in-path over lines, color lines of pattern, and center communication setting surface. Process lines of E factors, process lines of evac locations of system. Center communication lines of travel and direct signals. Platforms line, direct signal outlines, core lines of platforms and direct signals grounds. Center core system of space lines of anomaly come in track location to a system. All through center, all through operation. All together. So it's not just the inner line, the outer line. It's the outer line, inner line. That's the balance of direct and redirect. Okay? It's not just the inner and outer. Okay? You guys are here. Now you got to come back here. Right? Then this and this comes together. Okay? Comes together. When it comes together, then you extend spectrum light. Core lines of calculated lines, inner core lines of clocking, and outer core lines of clocking. Setting direct lines of spectrum is a line signal case near system. Let's put line settings, process line triangulation lines of flux, over cross location screens into outer space and traction. Outer space, inner space. So it's the reverse now, where you're supposed to be. Outer space, inner space. There's the balance. But remember, our computer goes direct and redirect. So when it goes faster, that's what it sounds like in set position. When it's track locations. That's all it is. You're just files. Everybody's just files. Your data files. Process lines of data 1, process lines of data 2, data 3, data 4, data 5, data 5, data 6, data 7, data 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. That's all you are, it's just files. Process lines of 1 indicate high core centers. There's your tesseract. Change core centers, ground lines of grids, and set position locations. There's your tesseract. All right, see? Look at that. All the files of data and your tesseract locations. Now, setting lines of grounds is a core center lines of travel. Now, you got to signify one of 6, right? But you need a center ground of another 6 locations. 4, 5, and 6 locations, which is 12 in sequence. Now, what you get in 12 sequence of files, the core lines of 24 changes lines perimeters and parameters of center core system in track location measure that scales the communication lines and outlines screen adaptation. Process communications all together in travel. Look at that, how powerful it is in travel communications all through your tesseracts and your allsparks and track location that puts a mediation graph in communication clockings and out setting. All right, so you need to understand how to direct and redirect your signals of 6 and 6. This process lines of 1. You get a better communication lines of collaboration and partnership with 1 now. You split lines of 1. This is what it looks like in travel. You split it, right? Comes into its primer. You bring it in 3 lines of signals. Then you bring in 3 lines of graphs of center. Then you process communication setting and outline. Then process communication line high center location lines of inline. Process communication lines of center, center, and center operation system. Sets communication lines of 1 center, 1 traction, 1 division. Core lines of traction centers, open signals, open panel, existing all at once, and infinity lines of triangulation, high position of flux that puts position location of yin and yang. Going around and around in signal location system off their travel. Okay? So now we got to get you guys in the outline settings, outer space lines of clock location system. Process calculus lines 24 lines out, 40 lines out, 72 out, and 144 out. Bring in positions back in center of 0 operation, point lines of 1, 1, 1. Okay, that's where there will be interaction. Okay, 4 panels of signal going this way. Going ground lines, there's your pyramid. Sending ground lines in 1 symbol, cross location, down cross location. 3 line signals and setting. That's your pyramid, that's your walkway, that's your surface. Sending core lines and ground lines and set position location to its runway. See the runway? That's calculation screen adaptation. Cross line communications. Okay. Center core lines, back in traction, back division, back locations. Okay. Walking communication lines and settings, process communication setting through light. So as light travels through line, position, location, and setting, clock position, location, outer space, inner space, outer space, inner space. Processing communication lines of 3 twos and tractions, indirect signals, modification grounds, direct and redirect. All right, so let's say we go through line signals, process lines of 4 tractions and 0. 0 correlations of platforms and direct signals of grounds. Okay, process lines, high center, and line rotation, surface, and traction. Setting signals, rotate the surface and tractions. Platforms E over factors over C. Setting core lines of 1 and travel and point lines of 3. Setting core lines of center core system and probing and detection screen adaptations across communications. Setting core lines of channels and operation surface. Bring it back home in equations, back in center, back in calculations. Okay, all 4 angles. So once you go back to line position location, back to 0, now you're in 0, 1s. Your clocking system is now settings of in and out, center operation of 0, 1. Okay? That's what the team needs to come into, but they have to send the in, and they have to send the out, go back in the in, goes back to 0. So their platitude division of their thoughts, action, and emotions after 144 sequence, which is in 5 core centers, into core lines that calculates lines of exodus. Exodus, lines of barometer, lines of thermometer, line screen, adaptation, all lulls. Puts communication settings all through all lulls. That puts lines in the Halley's Comet, directing signal lines of grounds in your constellation system and travel. Sets core center location setting to 144,000 hemispheres and tractions. Set lines of 0 equals lines of 0 and travel. Okay. Set lines of 3 zeros and 3 center communications. Triangulation lines of 1, triangulation lines of 2 over setting. Process lines of the pyramid. Setting core lines and perimeters over screen, 3 lines of signals and travel. Set core lines of 3 centers, 3 signals in set position. Process lines of indication system, all through traction. Core lines of travel, communicate the line signals on position of the platform. 1 signal, 4 signals out. 4 signals in, 4 signals out. 4 communication setting and travel in set position. Location grounds, flux over screen, direct signals and modification grounds. Sets communication lines of travel and direct signals and ground communications. All right, so we set the core system of its Earth, rotate the centers of its platform, direct lines of Earth lines of space and travel communications. Direct core centers, center core lines of tubing, 2 lines of platforms, 3 lines of measure, 4 lines of signals. Teleportation unit and platform communication setting to your diamond core and track location. Oh yeah. All right. 0 lines of 1, 0 lines of 2 of center. The 3 lines of core centers of transits over divots over 4 sequence lines that calculates and setting your crop circles. So it communicates the highest lines of travel and sets location to a system, all 3 transformers. Setting core lines of travel, indirect signals, and modification grounds. Core lines that calculate setting into your location grid and travel communicates to your pyramids. Setting walk lines of service, process lines of 1, process lines of 2, process lines of 3, clocking centers, outline, inline rotation surface, and track locations. Down to equation. See how it travels? Right? Everything modifies its system in seconds, minutes, and hours, guys. So you have to understand how to process your divots, per panel, per op, per square, per root, per kilometer, line position measure, millimeter, centimeter, core centers, line communications, a homometer. A homometer is a home beacon lights. Now, it processes the operation lines into metric core centers, into mine lines accepting, core lines to existing lines into MK Ultra. MK Ultra sets core centers into all of the transformation lines, outline signals, inside rotation surface, and track location. Travel lines, point lines, and graph communications. So all you guys have to do is use your formula equations and do it from the outlines of sky now, no longer in the inner spectrum. Your set track location setting is knowing exactly how to use it through a flux and track location of the light. Look at that, flux capacitor. Okay? That signifies core centers lines of travel. See you in 5 minutes.